Hey guys and gals, Vlad here with AVT-Astro, and today I've got a special treat for you guys, and that is a full review of the Astrophysics 110GTX for visual use. For those of you that might not be familiar, I run a little Astro blog called AVT-Astro.com, and of course this YouTube channel, so if you're not subscribed, please do consider subscribing. Over the last 25 years, I've had the privilege of owning over 100 scopes, more accessories than I can count. And having said all that, let's get down to the topic of this video. Alrighty guys, here she is in all her beauty. I just wanted to give you guys a quick overview of the scope and kind of, its basic specs. If you guys have not seen my unboxing video of the scope, I am linking that up above right now. Check that out. That kind of, gives you a lot more closer looks of the scope. And I talk about, kind of specs of it a little bit more as well. But generally speaking, guys, this is the newest offering from Astrophysics, which are widely considered to be the best, probably refractors on the planet. Again, the 110 GTX, as you can see, this is an F6 system, 110 millimeters. This is a triplet apochromatic objective. As you can see, very beautiful emerald green coatings on it, so very nice. Kind of going around the back here, these guys do ship with a very nice, it's not a true feather touch focuser, but a feather touch pinion, 2-speed, very smooth. Alrighty guys, and with all the basics about the scope, kind of out of the way, this is not my first night using it. I purposely did not make this review, shortly after buying the scope. I've owned it for about 2 months, I believe now already. I've used it pretty extensively, visually for deep sky, for the planets, with night vision devices. We'll cover all that, in the review. So, stick around through the whole thing. Make sure you stick around till the end to the conclusions, because I'll have a couple of, I think you'll find very interesting points for you to consider. Tonight, what I am doing is actually doing kind of like a real shootout between this thing and a couple of really premium apochromatic refractors that are in this aperture range that are, like kind of direct competitor to this. So let's take a look at them. Alrighty, ladies and germs, here are the contenders. This is getting serious. From smallest to largest, we have, first up, the TMB 105 millimeter CNC classic telescope. Next up, we have the FSQ 106 ED F5 quadruplet. And of course, in the middle, we have the Astrophysics 110 GTX, followed by the largest in the crowd, which is the 115 millimeter Officina Stellifer. Alrighty guys, and while we have this cool shot going on, I just want to tell you a little bit about each one of these scopes, so that you know kind of the basics of them and kind of, how they're kind of stacking up in that type of deal. Again, so this guy over here, 115 millimeters, this one uses the Russian LZOS lens set. It's a triplet lens, considered to be one of the best on the planet. It's got the premium 3.5 inch feather touch, top of the line focuser. So that'll be a good comparison, to compare it to the Astrophysics 110 GT. Okay, so the 110 GT we've already kind of covered, the basics of it, so we'll skip over that. The FSQ 106, that guy out there. Very, very, very popular and probably the biggest contender, to the 110 GTX. I'm sure the Astrophysics, had an FSQ there while they were there designing the 110 GTX, because the 110 GTX is primarily actually an astrophotography scope, and the FSQ 106 is one of the most popular astrophotography scopes. But there's some crazy people like me that use them for visual use as well. And then some of you guys might be familiar, it's an older scope, for sure, like one of the oldest ones here, if not the oldest. The guy at the end over there, the 105 TMB CNC Classic, also uses the LZOS Russian triplet objective. Alrighty guys, it's totally dark outside, and I'm excited to start doing all the tests that I'm planning on doing. Tonight I am planning on doing a star test on the telescopes, a color correction test on Vega. Vega is right up above, so that's perfect for that. I'm gonna do some deep sky, some double stars, and probably look at Saturn as well with all of these. So I'm going to be running back and forth a lot. I am not going to annoy all my neighbors by talking all night long out here. So we'll kind of meet up, after I'm done with doing all these testing. and kind of continue the video there. See ya. Whew, guys, that was a lot of running around last night, you know, changing out the scopes, you know, on the mount and kind of comparing them, that type of deal. But it was a really good time. So anyhow, let's get down to reviewing this guy. Alrighty guys, and last night as I was doing the comparison, I did take some notes, so that's kind of what I'm going to be looking down at here. Again, to reiterate, that was not my first time using the scope. I've used it for a few months already, so I've got a, you know, a good amount of experience with it. The other scopes that I was comparing it to, I have used them, you know, pretty extensively as well, but you know, you can't really compare scopes until they're out on the same night, looking at the same objects. So that's what I want to bring to you guys. And let's start with the star test. Guys, all of the scopes, they star tested very well. I will say, interestingly enough, the FSQ 106 did have the most similar star test in and out of focus. I'll kind of run through them all real quick. This guy, it had a star test that's very good on one side of focus. I believe that was on the outside of focus. If it's wrong, I'll correct it in the description. Inside of focus, there's one donut that's a little bit thicker than the other ones, and overall the pattern is not quite as crisp as on the other side of focus, but completely color free. Guys, I'm not a star testing like Wiz, even though I have read the book on star testing. That was a few years ago. I mean, technically you want the star test to look exactly the same on both sides of focus. I have yet to, you know, come across a scope that actually does that does show a perfectly 100%, you know, equal star test on both sides of focus. I know people claim it all the time that their telescope that they bought for $300 has a perfect star test, you know, on both sides of focus. You know, like show that to me, please, one of these days. Alrighty, and kind of getting down to the LZOSs, the 105 millimeter, it had a very good, you know, pretty equal star test on both sides of focus. I'd say pretty similar, you know, like overall to, you know, what this guy is. They're definitely, especially outside of focus at high power, you could definitely, you know, it's kind of surprising to me because I always figure those scopes to be 100% color free. Actually, on both the 105 and the 150 millimeter at 200x outside of focus on Vega, you could actually see some, you know, kind of blue. You know, I typically don't really care about that, but you know, I just wanted to point that out. So overall, guys, I mean, the star test was really good on all of them. The FSQ 106, I'd say looked the most similar, just the most concentric and the most kind of more vivid star test on both sides of focus. Okay, moving on to color correction. I will kind of start with, you know, like the other scopes, and I'll kind of move on to this one because that's kind of the more interesting one as far as color correction. FSQ 106, you know, guys, I did not have an eyepiece, you know, set up for that to where I could really crank up the power. It was color free at the most power that I could get it to, which is 96x. Not surprising at all. Previously though, I will say that I have seen color with it, you know, like when I have, you know, had it set up with a 2-inch diagonal that allows me to focus with, you know, higher power eyepieces. It will start to show some secondary color at higher powers. Although that scope is not really made to be a high power scope anyway, it's a wide field, you know, astrograph. And typically when I'm using it visually, it's really at low powers with, you know, the massive 30 millimeter 100-degree Explore Scientific 3-inch eyepiece. Okay, moving on to the LZOSs, the 115 millimeter and the 105. Color correction at 200x in focus was perfect. Like I did not on Vega see any secondary color at all. The reason that I, by the way, chose 200x as the, you know, the power, you know, to kind of test the color correction at is because realistically, guys, I mean, a 4-inch scope, which is, you know, what all of these are more or less, that's already 50 times per inch of aperture, which, you know, typically people consider to be kind of like the max, you know, for a scope. So yeah, so I'd say that, you know, like if you're color free at 200x, you're good to go. But I, you know, kind of cranking up the power past the 200x, like especially I have noted down here with the 115 millimeter, I was able to get it up to 268x with this actual eyepiece with the Cybon 3 to 8 millimeter zoom. And I could tell a hint of color around Vega, you know, at that higher power, but, you know, really that was kind of me looking for a nitpicking, so really not objectable at all. All right, and last but not least, what about the 110 GTX, right? Guys, so inside and out of focus, like I said on the star test, there's zero secondary color. At 200x, there's zero secondary color, like not even a slight hint of it. I cranked up, you know, I actually took out a 2x Barlow. I have a Astrophysics one, so it's, you know, a pretty nice one. Cranked up the power to 414x, right? Or sorry, no, 440x actually. Still color free on Vega. I mean, color correction on this thing, guys, is just like absolutely mind-blowing. It's certainly better than the other scopes by a pretty big margin, I would say. Okay, moving on to double stars. So I like to use the double in Lyra, you know, like kind of as a sample star to split doubles. I could typically split it, you know, on most nights, even when the scene is not that great, and the scene wasn't, you know, like amazing on the night that I was doing these tests. I'll list, you know, the separations of them. It's not like super close, but for a 4-inch scope, you know, it's a fairly close separation. All of the scopes split it, you know, basically what I was trying to do is I was using, you know, the zoom eyepieces to kind of see like what the lowest power that I could split it at clearly would be. All of the scopes split at about 75x. I'd say, you know, equal performance. It looked beautiful in all the scopes. So really, I didn't notice any significant difference in performance with any of these guys. Alrighty guys, so get into deep sky. Even though these are, you know, like roughly only a 4-inch scope, I love using these, especially in conjecture with like a larger Dob. You know, like typically I use my 24-inch Dob with something that's like a 4-inch, you know, for those really wide field of views. But I did want to test it not just for the wide field of views, which I did. I used the double cluster in Perseus. For like the really wide, you know, object. And then I also did M27, you know, just in case, let's say you want to use this as, you know, like your primary, just like single scope. For the smaller object, you know, kind of sample. So what did I find? Not surprisingly, guys, there wasn't like a huge difference in performance, but there are a couple of notes that I took that I think, you know, are pretty significant. So the LZ-OS, the 115 millimeter, not surprisingly, I mean, it is the largest aperture, but you know, it's only a 5 millimeter difference with this, so it's not like, you know, it's not huge. It did, interestingly enough, it showed the stars, the orange giants in the double cluster a little bit more prominent. Like the orange just kind of really popped at me, and I could just really kind of detect the color better. I'm not sure if it's just because of the like slightly better or larger aperture, I guess, or what it is. But yeah, the color and the stars definitely pop more with that scope. The other scopes, you know, I didn't really know too big of a difference with them. Excellent performance on them. With the FSQ 106, which I found to be kind of interesting. This is, you know, like one thing that I kind of found personally interesting out of this comparison, because I use that scope a lot for the really wide, you know, field of views with the 30 millimeter, you know, Explore Scientific, like I said, a 3-inch. The cluster definitely showed less star, and just overall, it wasn't as much pop. It was the widest field of view though, so the you know, obviously it was a lower power. I'll post in the comparison of what all the field of views are, you know, with these scopes that I got right now. But anyway, yeah, it was a lower power, but really, I found personally, like on that subject, the other 3 scopes kind of like a better image on the double cluster. Okay, so moving on to M27. So that's kind of like the, you know, M27 is not super small, but it's definitely a smaller, you know, Planetary nebula. So on that one, like, what did I find? All the scopes, you know, performed, you know, really well. The image showed up really nicely in all of them. I did note though, with the 110 GTX, that the double hourglass shape. So, you know, there's the prominent, you know, bright hourglass shape, but there's also one that's kind of, you know, going the opposite way. I'm posting a picture in right now that I recently did an EEA stack with my 16-inch RCX 400. But anyway, so that secondary kind of dimmer hourglass shape, I did note that this scope kind of presented it a little bit more prominently than the other ones, which I kind of attribute to the better contrast of this scope overall. But on M27, besides, you know, like kind of like what I perceived as better contrast on this thing, it was not a huge difference. I really didn't notice any other differences. Besides with the 115, I did feel like the stars that are embedded in M27, they did pop a little bit more. Again, I'm not sure if it's like the sharper optics, like, you know, that it has like sharper optics, or the slightly better or bigger aperture, I should say. But the stars definitely, like on that scope, just kind of pop more, you know. Whoo! Whew. All right, guys, so now we're getting into the hairy stuff. Okay, the planets. What I think about the planetary performance on the scope. So I looked at Saturn on the night that I was doing the comparison. The scene wasn't great, like I said, so, you know, it really looked very similar in all the scopes. I'd really need a night of excellent scene to really kind of sit down and compare them side by side. Unfortunately, lately, guys, I've been getting terrible scene, but I have had this thing out, you know, and then pretty good scene, and I've looked at both Saturn and Jupiter with them. So I'll kind of just talk more about the 110 GTX in regards to planets. Awesome images, guys, as you'd expect. Just overall, you know, like a very nice view of, you know, the planets with this. There's no surprises there. Now, I will say though, is it something like, was the view like just kind of extraordinary and mind-blowing and better than anything that I've seen? Absolutely not, guys. I mean, it's still a 4-inch scope, so I'd say that it'll give you the best view that a 4-inch scope will give you, but is it gonna like beat my 16-inch RCX 400 that I have out in the observatory on the night of excellent scene? Absolutely not. Actually, one thing that I did know on the night of, you know, kind of better scene, and, you know, just kind of like as a reference point, the maximum amount of dark bands, not like just bands total, but just dark bands I'm talking about on Jupiter that I was able to see with this guy is 6 on the disk of, you know, the planet. With my 16-inch, you know, RCX 400 on the night of just like absolutely just phenomenal scene, I was able to see 12 bands. So I mean, you know, like that's comparing a 16-inch scope, of course, to a 4-inch. But the reason that I bring that up, guys, don't expect this to just like defy the laws of physics. It's still a 4-inch scope, you know, no matter how good it is. Okay, guys, and then just kind of some general, you know, observations, you know, in regards to visual observance. So with single eyepieces, the thing that I did note is that since this is an f6 scope, it does suffer, you know, a decent amount of field curvature. So with my Explore Scientific eyepieces that I like to use a lot, the 100 degrees, I'd say, especially with the 25 millimeter, the field curvature really starts to get like fairly noticeable at like out from 60 degrees or 60% out, you know, of the field of view. Like with this guy, with the sidebond zoom, with the 16 to 8 millimeter, this one also suffers some field curvature in faster scopes. So it's definitely noticeable in this thing. Now I did, of course, have to compare it to like, you know, like a really premium eyepiece. So I did try to use the scope with the 13 millimeter ethos, and that was a lot better controlled, you know, coma in that. Basically, I'd say it was very well controlled to like 85–90% of the field of view. So, you know, I'd say if you want to do, you know, like a really wide field of view eyepieces, I'd certainly invest in like the better televiews or, you know, just better corrected eyepieces in general. So kind of, you know, to conclude that point, you know, with the field curvature, the FSQ 106 is definitely better corrected, but that's not surprising because it does have a field flattener built in. It's a quadruplet. So this is a triplet, you know, there's 3 lenses here, nothing in the back here. Typically, when you're using this for astrophotography, there's a field flattener that you'd use that's, you know, an add-on one. The FSQ 106 already has one built in, so it's definitely better corrected, you know, even though it's a f5 scope. The LZOSs, I'd say especially the f7, the 115, that then definitely pretty much doesn't have any field curvature at all, so it's definitely better in that regard. Again, though, if you have better corrected eyepieces than what I typically use, you're probably not going to care about that. But you know, I just kind of want to kind of point that out because that's one thing that I did certainly notice with this thing. Okay, so moving on. The next aspect of observing bino viewers. So I've had the, you know, the DINK Binotron for a while. I've used this with many scopes. I love this thing. Interestingly enough, so typically to focus this with the refractor, you'd screw in an optical corrector on the diagonal here, on the nose piece of the diagonal, right? And that'll let you reach focus. Well, with this then, when you screw the optical corrector into the diagonal, you could only reach focus at the high power setting. So that was kind of interesting. And then I did try to actually screw the optical corrector just into the nose piece here and then put this into the diagonal. And then I am able to reach it in the medium and low power settings. So anyway, I'd say that's kind of a bummer. I'm not sure what the deal is with that. I didn't play around too much with it to see like if an extension tube or something would help. But Just straight out of the box though, this is the first scope that I've had that this binotron with that optical corrector would not come to focus in all 3 power settings. So that is kind of a bummer, but you know, it is what it is. Alrighty, and then I still consider this visual, so I'll talk about it a little bit. Night vision, does that work with the GTX? Guys, I've used this, you know, with all the scopes. It works great with all of them. This thing is certainly no exception. Night vision, you know, produces a very nice crisp image with this. It does reach focus really well, so no issues there. Okay, and to start summing stuff up and bring the ship home, right? What did I think just in general, you know, of, overall of the scope for visual use, okay? I'll start with the physical aspects of it. The build, you know, quality on these is beautiful. They're one of the best, you know, built scopes I feel on the market. Not surprising given the price point, right? But anyway, yeah, it's all metal. I love the finish. I love the texture finish on this. This focuser, it's a nice unit. Overall, I mean, I wish that they did use the actual Feather Touch 3.5 mil, or not 3.5 millimeter, 3.5 inch instead of this 3-inch that they use. I mean, the reason that I say that, guys, it's not that this focuser is worse, like, you know, like operationally wise. It's just that the way that the like attachments attached to it is kind of more like proprietary or whatnot, I'd say. So like all of my normal stuff that I'd normally use with that 3.5 inch Feather Touch, such as the 3-inch compression ring, the adapter doesn't work with this. So like for me personally, that's a bummer. If you're just starting out, you know, fresh, and you don't really care about like running a 3-inch diagonal, you're probably not really going to care. This is a very nice focuser, but for me personally, I do wish that the 3.5 inch was standard on this. Overall, operation-wise, I did compare this pretty extensively with the 3.5 inch that's on the 115 millimeter LZOS scope. Excuse me, scope. Yeah, it worked, I mean, pretty much identically. Like I couldn't, you know, tell too much of a difference in the feel of, you know, just kind of operating it for visual use. So that's good. Alrighty, guys, so that kind of covers the physical aspects of the scope. There's really nothing that I don't like. It's great. I love it. Okay. Now, from a purely optical standpoint for visual use. Now, I will, you know, before I kind of, you know, give my final conclusion on the scope, I do want to make it very, very clear, okay, guys? This scope, it's not really designed to be a visual scope. It's really designed to be more of like an astrophotography scope, which I'm hoping to still make a video on that as well. But since we're talking about visual, from a purely visual standpoint, considering how much this thing costs, so it's $7,000 currently with no rings, no nothing, you know, just for the OT. By the time you add some rings, the dovetail, the diagonal, you're looking basically at $8,000, you know. What I say from a purely visual standpoint is this telescope optically better than like the other 3 that, let's say, I tested, which are also premium scopes. I mean, they're not like entry-level scopes. Considering the price point, like if I was spending my own money, which I did, you know, Astrophysics didn't send this to me, you know, to like, you know, show it to you guys. I would say, I'd like, unless you just have like money to burn, the other scopes perform just as well, pretty much in all aspects of observance. So I'd say, considering the very premium price point of this, that for just visual use, I personally want to spend my money. Like if I was actually to get an Astrophysics, I'd just find a used like 130 GT or GTX perhaps. You could usually find them for around $8,000 used. I mean, obviously it's a used scope versus a new scope, but you know, for that amount of money, I'd personally probably prefer just the 5-inch, or, you know, like pick up, you know, another, like, you know, pick up a used TAC, or pick up a, like a used, you know, like one of the LZOSs that I have, which are awesome optics, and you could get them, I mean, for like $3,000 and less. So anyway, I don't want to, you know, finish this review on a down note. I'm just pointing out, you know, kind of like my personal feelings about it. If I bought this thing, you know, purely for visual use, you know, like after like trying it out, and honestly guys, I didn't expect to find anything that I, you know, found different. I mean, again, it's essentially a perfect 4-inch scope, but it's a 4-inch scope. It's not going to defy the laws of physics. If you do have the funds and you want an excellent, just, you know, top-notch, both physically and optically, 4-inch APO, this is it, guys. So anyway, thank you guys for watching. If you guys have any questions, comments, or anything like that, please leave them in the thing below. If you're not subscribed, please do consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.